Well, hello, everyone, and welcome to the College of the Humanities. My name is Shane Hawkins. I'm the director of the college. I just want to extend a welcome to everyone. Nice to see this turnout. Nice to see such a good turnout online. Also for this talk, I would like to welcome members of the Diplomatic Corps. Of course, I'd like to welcome Ambassador Athanasiadou. It's lovely to see you again. Thank you for your support. Very kindly. Thank you. I'm going to turn it over to Aris Kostala, who will introduce, say something about Parnassus and Sims, and also introduce our speaker today.
Your Excellency, Ambassador of Greece to Canada, it's Konstantina Athanasiadou. Dignitaries from the embassies, our honored speaker today, Professor Lela Karayanni. Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. And thank you for joining us today. On behalf of the Parnassos Hellenic Cultural Society of Ottawa and the Canadian Institute of Mediterranean Studies, I welcome you to this event, which is a joint effort between both cultural associations. And you will find information about the activities of both organizations of associations planned until May. If you go out to the hall where there's a table, and you can see what events have been planned. So it's now my pleasure to introduce to you our keynote speaker, Professor Lela Karayanni. And Professor Perrakis was born in Greece, obtained his first degree from the National Polytechnic Institute in Athens in 1960. He obtained graduate degrees, including his PhD in 1970 from the University of California, Berkeley. He was a professor of economics and finance at the University of Ottawa from 1970 to 2000, and has been a professor of finance at Concordia from 2000 to the present. Professor Perrakis was elected as a fellow of the Royal Society of Canada in 2007. He is widely published on academic topics, and with his most recent article being published in 2022. He has several works in progress. Since 2000, Professor Perrakis has been increasingly involved in the study and publication of works relating to modern Greek history, in particular the study of World War II, the German and Italian occupation of Greece, and the Civil War which followed. These are events which affected his own childhood and youth. In 2006, his book, The Ghost of Plaka Beach, A True Story of Murder and Retribution in Wartime Greece, was published in English by Associate University Presses, Fairleigh Dickinson's University Press. A Greek adaptation was published in 2010 under the title The Ghosts of the Civil War, Plaka Argolida 1943-1944. It was a bestseller in Greece and it's still in print. He has also published an article in the Journal of Modern Greek Studies and made several conference presentations on related topics. His book that he will present us today, The Improbable Heroine, Lela Karayanni and the British Secret Services in World War II Greece, was published in both English and Greek in 2022. I would like to take the opportunity to note that this presentation takes place 3 days before International Women's Day. And it's a very fitting tribute to all the women who took part in the resistance against the occupying forces in World War II. They rose to the call, and some of them made the ultimate sacrifice, such as Lela Karayanni. But lots of them are not mentioned in the history books. Lela Karayanni is joined in his presentation by Basil Bazafiriou and Philip Augustine, who have read the book and will each provide comments on a specific issue raised in the book. And they're both amateur historians. Basil Zafiriou is an Ottawa-based economist. Retired from the Federal Public Service, he now concentrates his work mainly on Greek affairs and the Greek diaspora. And Phil Augustine is an Ottawa-based lawyer who has, from time to time, spoke on historical topics related to modern Greek history. I will now pass the microphone to Philip Augustine, who will explain to you how this book presentation is structured before we allow Professor Perrάκis to talk. Thank you.
Thank you all. My duty at this point is to outline the order of proceedings today. So after I'm done speaking here, Professor Perrάκis will deliver the first part of his presentation. I will then speak for about 5 minutes, providing some comments from the perspective of a reader of the book. Professor Perrάκis will then deliver the second part of his presentation, and then that's part C, and part D, Basil Zachario will speak for about 5 minutes on a particular topic, again, from the perspective of a reader of the book. And then Professor Perrάκis, part E, will deliver the final part of his presentation. And then we'll conclude with a question and answer period. And we'll have some, for those of you who are online, you'll be able to ask questions through the chat facility. And Shane will field those questions, and then I'll field questions in the room. And then there'll be a reception following. So we're going to be jumping up and down a little bit like Jack in the Box here. The challenge is to make sure we get the microphone on our tires.
Yes.
So without further ado, please give a warm welcome to the author of The Improbable Heroine, Professor Stelios Perrάκis.
Ladies and gentlemen, ambassador, members of the diplomatic community, dear friends and relatives who listen to me from afar, and it's a pleasure to present, to have the opportunity to say a few words about the book that is being presented. It's a biography, the first in English, of a remarkable woman that has been celebrated in Greece as a national icon for how many years, close to 80 years, even though most Greeks don't know what she actually did. She is as I found out, by talking with people, she is known mostly as a person who, if you like, helped British escapees and stragglers who were left behind when the British were defeated and had to evacuate mainland Greece in 1941. And she was one of those who took care of them, some of them. But that covered only 5 months of a 38-month resistance career. The other 33 months, 5 of them were spent when she was in prison, but then she managed to be found not guilty and came out. And the rest of it was she achieved, if you like, a performance as a spy master, assisting saboteurs and planting agents in German and Italian occupation forces. And last but not least, in the end, she got involved with the armed resistance, following instructions from the British patrons in order to avoid a Polish takeover of Greece. And that's when, in the course of that event, she was betrayed, or by accident, actually not betrayed, you found out, and she was arrested and executed. So it's a remarkable career, however you view it. Why did I bother to write this, if you like, biography? Well, first of all, a person like her is part of the moral capital of Greece. We would like to promote, we would like to be known for what she did, because she was a woman in a society that, to put it mildly, did not exactly value women very much. Okay? terms of, certainly they were not equal. They were not going very often. They were not encouraged to go to universities, and they were more or less, if you like, treated like second class. You'll see some statements. I'll read you some statements made about her by people who in the end came to worship her, to admire. But they were prejudiced from the beginning. They were with their approach. So, as I said, this is the fact that I want to promote her because she was a woman and she was also, she was a heroine. She lost her life fighting for a good cause. I want also to remind you that for the first year, the year from June 1940 till June, when France fell to the Germans, till June 1941, when the attack against the Soviet Union took place, the British were fighting alone. The British Empire, Great Britain, was fighting alone against Nazis. During that time, 6 months of that year, Greece stood on the side of Great Britain from October till 1940 till April 1941, when it fell to the Germans. So this again is part of its moral capital, which is promptly, managed to dissipate it, because the end of the war, when everybody celebrated the end of the war, Greece does not celebrate the end of the war, because the end of the war ended up with fighting among the rival resistance organizations, which turned out to be the prelude to a 5-year civil war that ended in 1949. So, as you see, anything we can add to the moral capital of Greece will help. So, the person whose career I'm describing everything she did was geared towards winning the war, helping the Allies win the war, everything. She had no involvement absolutely to the civil side, except when she was ordered to do something. Then she had to do it, because it came from the British. As some of you may know, by the end of the war, the British were desperately trying to prevent a communist takeover of Greece. So, without further ado, let me also point out, this is the picture of Lela, from the photo of Lela Karayanni. And as I said, other women who joined the fight against the Nazis have had full biography, and there is even a recent movie for 3 of them, Virginia Hall, Vera Atkins, and Nuri Nayat Khan. A very nice movie, actually, so I recommend it. So these 3 ladies, the first one is Virginia Hall, this is Vera Atkins, and this is Nur Nayat Khan. So there were 3 spies, and they were, this is a film, one of them lost her life, Nur was arrested and executed. So I would like to have such movies made about also the Greek resistance, and not propaganda movies, movies that glorify really people worth of such glorification. So let's see what was Lela's resistance career in summary. She joined the fight against Nazis in mid-May 1941, 3 weeks after the Germans marched into Athens in April 27. She rose quickly in the ranks of the resistance. After the first 5 months, as I said, when she took care of stragglers and escapees, then she ran her own spy business. She was a spy master of her own agents and her own communication channel. She did not depend on anybody else. She got instructions straight from the source, from the British Secret Services, to channels that had not been able to find it, because they have not released any material, but it's obvious she was getting instructions and material. Her assigned tasks became more and more elaborate and more important. The last one, when she was involved in the armed resistance, and of course politically delicate and controversial, So, but she had to do it. She was ordered. And she was betrayed and arrested in July 44 and executed after torture on September 8. The German army left Athens less than a month later. So that was her career. So who was Lela Karayanni? Let's first of all describe her as a person. So let's take a look at a picture of her from the mid-1930s, most probably. What do you see? You see a woman, still attractive, you know. We know she was born in 1998, so it was probably 37 years old, in 1935. She clearly looks prosperous, okay? But impeccably dressed and coiffed, a professional photographer, and she, let's see another picture of her now with her family. So she had 6 children by that time. She adopted the 7th one, a little girl was born in 1937, 2 years after this picture probably. And what do you see? You see clearly a well, if you like, dressed and prosperous looking family in Greece. They were desperately poor at that time. Indeed, she was very prosperous financially, thanks to her husband, who was surprisingly a refugee from Izmir, who also, managed to get some money out of Smyrna, where before they captured by the Turks in September 1922. And this could have been done only between 1919 and 1921. That's when the only time. But he managed to get some money out and invested very nicely became a wholesaler of pharmaceuticals and also perfume, a signature perfume and cosmetics business in downtown Athens. I knew this store. I used to was in Patissier on Street near the Polytechnic, the Pneumonia and the Polytechnic. So, they were living a good life, and that's the house, that's the house, which at that time, in 1940s, was surrounded by empty lots, because it was the northern outskirts of Athens in the Patissier area. And now, of course, it's all built up for the metropolitan, Athens metropolitan area, sprawled in all directions. So that's the house, if you like, and because it was empty, it was very convenient, because she was not exposed to nosy neighbors. As you understand, with the career that she had, there was a lot of coming and going, and the dangers of betrayal were always present. So let's see now Lela's last picture, 7 to 9 years later. There's the last picture. Okay, it's a photo of her corpse after she was machine gunned to death. You can see clearly the traces of the bullets on the face. And it was taken in the Cotignan Cemetery, the suburb of Piraeus, on September 8 or 9, 1944. The execution was on the 9th. So, there. The German officer who had interrogated her under merciless torture for 2 months was very proud of her capture, calling her, quote, the greatest British spy in the Balkans. Lela was undeniably one of the greatest female spies, not in the Balkans only, in all of World War II Europe. And in terms of achievement, she fully matched and probably exceeded the best known female British World War II secret agents, most of whom survived, and almost all of them who had full-length biographies. So that was the reason for this book. This way. Why improbable? Why do we call her improbable? Well, she was improbable. She was not, from what you saw, this prosperous housewife with the 7 children. Why would she become a secret agent? And also, She was not particularly well educated. She had finished most probably high school, but never went to ballet. Most obviously because she married at 18 and started having children right away. She was monolingual Greek. She didn't speak any foreign languages. She had no prior involvement in politics or military affairs. And also, she accidentally stumbled in the resistance. She was not recruited. They didn't approach her, if you like. They didn't come to her. But she accidentally stumbled. She did something. She delivered some services, and they recruited her. She had never received any training in secret activities or espionage, unlike Virginia Hall and Nurin Ayat Khan were trained for several weeks in a camp in Scotland. And there were the Special Operations Executive, which was an agency founded in early 1940, precisely it was called the Churchill's Service of Ungentlemanly Welfare, because it had to do dirty jobs. Sabotage, espionage, subversion, especially, raising armed bands to fight the occupying troops. So they recruited the agents, by various means, and they applied. A lot of these women applied there, very aware. And if Lela had applied, she would have been rejected out of hand with some snide comments about, she didn't have any apparently no resources. Well, she had resources. But what she had resources, they were not obvious, but they were real. She learned on the job to operate in secrecy in occupied Athens very quickly and very effectively. She rose very fast in the ranks of the resistance. You shall see her managing male collaborators who were officers of the Greek army. In the next set of, by speaking, I'll reproduce some of their exchanges with him. He was a first lieutenant, Ipologamos of the Greek army, and yet he worked under her. She gave him order, told him what to do, and he followed order. And so she, to the point when a high SOE personality came to Athens, Rapestani, of course, she was the one who met him, and she kept vigil so it wouldn't be found by the German patrol. So to that point, she was the boss, if you like. It's unthinkable for Greece of the 1940s and the event. She also lasted for more than 3 years, much longer than other iconic resistance figures that she collaborated with, and she was arrested, the traitor executed through no fault of her own. So, what do we do in this book? Document this evolution from prosperous housewife to master spy. Again, as I said, between May 41 and July 10, 1944. Based mostly on Greek archival material of Lela's Bubulina group, as well as several other resistance groups that were extensions of the British Secret Service with which Lela collaborated. Now, this material is interesting and informative, but it has to be handled with care because it is full, as you know, the narrative contains some contradictory, often self-serving, and omit certain events that would have embarrassed their authors. Like we find that they were pilfering stores and selling them to Lela in order to feed her own, to feed the British officers that she was hosting, first phase of her career. So they didn't say it. You find it from other sources. But at any rate, so there are no mention of Lela in British archival material. That's why Lela has been ignored by British archival. Yet we know that she was a member of the British Secret Service, SIS, Secret Intelligence Service, probably Military Intelligence 9, escapes, or Military Intelligence 6, espionage. these units are like SOE, have never released any archives. So let's see, why do we know that Lela was a member? There, look at this document. What I say, by the king's order, the name of Lela Karayanni was placed on record on 9 June 1947 as commended for brave conduct and charged to express His Majesty's high appreciation of the service rendered. So obviously, what does this tell you? There's a paper trail somewhere documenting the brave conduct and services that has not been released. Lela's picture at the cover of this book is also from the prominent display in the Special Forces Club, a club dedicated again to secret operatives, commandos, and spies, and saboteurs. And her picture is displayed there because she lost her life in the execution of Athens. So let's say, great. So the structure of the book, supplementary material, we have to talk a little bit about Lela's family situation, but we spent a lot of time on Greece's political context. How did they arrive to fight each other? The political environment of 1930 Greece. In 1921-22 war with Turkey, the population exchange, all of these are relevant, and we have to give some background, and also background on the wartime British secret services in Greece, the formation of SOE, the internal quarrels and their effects on the Greek components. Sometimes they were deadly. They used to, one error made, for instance, in the Middle East within SOE, ended up with problems. They would fight with 10 executions, 10 death sentences of people executed in Greece, and also the dissolution of several espionage schemes. So let's see the chronology of activities, and then I'll stop and pass to Philippe to Paris. So what is the chronology for activities? First of all, as I said, she was accidentally recruited in 1941, maybe sometime between May 10th and May 15th. And the first phase is what I call Mana Karayanni, Mother Karayanni, when she hosted the British, the BEF, British Expeditionary Forces scramblers and assisted in prisoner escapes, a big way, industrial way, not individual cases, but a mass. And then she was arrested in late October 23 or 24, and stayed in prison until March 26, 1942, where she was betrayed. Somebody was blackmailing her. But she was let go. She was found not guilty because the resistance made pressure on this blackmailer, and she recanted his testimony. And from that point on, she became a spy master and the assistant to saboteurs, planting agents at key German units, providing, receiving, and distributing wireless and sabotage equipment. From March 1943, she assisted Jews fleeing the Holocaust, something that I'm going to talk at the end of this presentation. And so from summer also 1943 on, she assisted non-communist armed resistance, with, of course, arrest and execution. So this we did. Now, point.
Say the mic's the tricky bit. So you've heard from the author and the writer of the book, Improbable Heroine, and I speak to you as a reader of the book and a person who's interested in modern Greek history. And I was really pleased to be given the opportunity to speak here today because it provides me with an opportunity to tell you just what an excellent book it is. I love history, and I'm particularly interested in the history of modern Greece, and this is a great historical account. And just as Professor Perracki had indicated, not just of Greece during the Second World War, but the history of modern Greece in the first half of the 20th century. Reading this book is an extremely rewarding experience at any level. And if you read a lot of history, you see after a while that history is often written as a vehicle for advancing current political arguments. And people look to the past to justify their opinions in the present. In the case of modern Greek history, this often results in the accuracy of historical accounts being warped to fit a right-wing or a left-wing perspective, and sometimes, depending on the time period during which it was written, you sort of have an idea of the bias that's coming. And good history seeks out the evidence and presents it accurately and honestly. And this book is an example of very good history. It's an accurate, evidence-based portrayal of the story of Lela Karayanni and the times and the circumstances in which she lived. The book exists in many layers, and you can read it at a more superficial level. If you want to turn through it sort of more or less quickly, you can, or you can drill down and follow the minute detail in which Professor Perracki has provided very, very detailed evidence and information through very in-depth research. I'm married to a Greek. My mother-in-law was born in 1932 in Piraeus, Greece. So she was a relatively young girl during the occupation. And when she spoke to me about the war, and I think it was in 2019, we were actually traveling through Piraeus, and just by happenstance, she was close to where she'd grown up. And she said, well, that's where the Gestapo had their office. I mean, it's just a remarkably different thing than is normally portrayed. It's real. Not, Hogan's Heroes or something. And she spoke about, she acknowledged Allied soldiers, so Canadians, Americans, Brits, went over to Greece, fought, many died. But it's a different thing to be occupied. And so I'm just doing some quick math. So she was about 12. So to be a 12-year-old girl that they were bombing, the Germans were occupying, the Gestapo office is there, it's a different thing. And the thing she spoke about was there's absolutely no protection. The occupying forces can do whatever they want. There's no protection. So in that environment, what you want to do is survive until the occupation ends. And the book Professor Perracki has written is about a Greek woman. So first of all, as he's indicated, a woman, second-class citizen, if you like, because of that, weaker, less powerful, more vulnerable, and then a mother of 7 children. So not exactly the resume of someone who's going to step out on a highly risky occupation. So for 3 years, or more than 3 years, she's a resistance leader and a spy. So one particular aspect of her heroic work, which I want to address, is extremely well described in the book, and full credit to the author for the detail. I want to focus on the highly professional manner in which she managed the risks inherent in participating in the resistance. And I gotta say, sometimes you're turning the page and she's indicated that she's got a relationships going with someone, and you think, like, that's a life or death decision. If the person you're trusting isn't worthy of that trust, you're dead and your family's at risk. And so it's a real page turn. The risks are immense, and to any form of resistance activity was to court the most brutal retaliation and retribution. And she risked that: arrest, torture, and likely execution. And the same fate was likely in store for her family members or any other resistance operators who were implicated along with her. And it's worth noting that the German army, the Wehrmacht, had a very regimented system of reprisals against the civilian population. And they deliberately applied methods of mass terror. So the German army would burn villages, arrest and hold hostages. So they actually would arrest people. I hadn't known that before some recent research. They'd arrest people and hold them as hostages because they had a 100-to-1 ratio So if a German soldier was killed through the resistance, they would kill 100 civilians. And they didn't want to have to chase around and collect them. So they have them held as hostages so they could take out 100 or more than 100, if more than that was what the ratio called for. So it was a terribly brutal environment. So in that environment, ensuring that resistance activities went undetected was an absolute must. Keeping information and identity of operatives secret was a must. And ensuring the safety of operatives was a must. And I'll give you just a brief example. She accepted the offer of resistance activity from a 17-year-old boy who was a trusted friend of her son. His name was Chris Jenkins, or Jenkins, and he, I probably got it wrong, but Jenkins, okay, sorry. Trusted friend, and he started, and it's interesting to follow it because she gives him very simple chores at first. On your paper route, when you're walking by the harbor, note the ships that are in the harbor. And then she elevates it, and it goes up and up and up to the point that, oh, when you're about, would you please go and get a camera and go into the general's office and photograph the map of the harbor so we can use that for bombing activity? I mean, pretty cool elevation, but she does it by degrees and she does it by degrees and she gets this information, she transports the information, and then she realizes he's at risk and she gets him out and she gets him up into the Greek mountains. And so she does this just amazing job of developing a spy network, insulating them from each other so that they're not at risk to each other, and then getting them to safety when they need to. So she wasn't a spy who, you know, did a little job somewhere. She did a fantastic job, and she did it herself at elevated levels herself. Really, really important to the Allied war effort. So she's a mother of 7 children who did all of that. And back to Professor Perracki.
Thank you for your kind words. Make me blush.
I deserve
it. Anyhow, so as I said, the first thing we look at now is the Lela Karayanni. And how was she? When I say she stumbled accidentally, no, because there was an injured and ill Australian British Expeditionary Force struggler who was left behind. He hadn't been arrested yet, but as I said, it was early May, and he was in bad shape. And then a poor woman saw him wandering in the streets of Athens. She took him to her house. You know, they couldn't speak a word that communicate with each other. But then she fed him a little bit. She took some care, but then she couldn't do anymore. She didn't have money. It was beyond her capacity. She sought a woman who was a nurse and an acquaintance of Lela, and he introduced this injured soldier to her and said, please do something with him. And this nurse, in turn, he knew Lela Karayanni, and he knew she was a generous and wealthy lady. So she took the struggler to Lela's house. And there he was taken care of by the 3 children, the 3 older children, her daughters Ioanna and Electra, and the son George, who through a friend of the family who was a doctor in the first aid station. So they took him there, and he was cured of his. They took care of, first of all, his health because he was in a bad shape. They took care of his injury and of his, if you like, whatever other health problems he had. Of course, secretly. It was highly illegal what they were doing. But and Lela did not, instead, did not host him at her house for reasons. I don't want to expand on it. We have to realize that what Lela did was not popular with her. It was, so she didn't want to disclose it. And he was, of course, he was a cautious man. He was prosperous. He fought with the Balkan War with distinction, but at the time, the age he had reached past his 40s. So he was, I think he had enough kind of activity, and he wanted to go through the occupation. She didn't let him. She didn't let him. And the relationship came under serious strain. But anyhow, that's neither here nor there. What I want to say is that as soon as this was learned somehow among in the pipeline of the British Secret Service, and then it's very probable that that was the time she was recruited by the Secret Intelligence Service. Why do I know it's very probable that it's recruited? Because she herself hired somebody to run this business of hosting stragglers, British stragglers, in a large scale. And these stragglers were augmented soon by escapees from a prisoner of war camp and hospital, which was operating in the Kokkinia suburb of Piraeus. And that's when, again, through unknown channels, he came in contact with an organized setup, this one by Greek MI9 agents. We know there were MI9 agents, somebody called Evgenios Balasakis and Alexander Davidis, both cashiered naval officers of cashiered officers of the Greek Navy during the troubles of the 1930s. So this setup was surprisingly extremely efficient. It helped the prisoner, those who could escape. Immediately they were directed to safe houses and eventually sent away from Greece to rejoin their units. So Lela became part and parcel of this setup, and she rented a safe house near her and hired agents to operate it. And she fed allied stragglers and escapees 10 and 15 or to 15 at a time. That's a huge number for one family. And all in all, I think she's credited with about 100 and 125, something around that, who were eventually let, if you like, go. They were guided, to most of them, some of them were arrested, but most of them managed to go to the Middle East through the escape. And the escape, there were mass escapes from the Kokkinia prison camp. Let me show you here. There's a historical picture. There are 5 British prisoners, escapees from the Kokkinia, and disguised as Greeks while hiding at Lela Karayanni's safe house. The one that's most important is the one in the middle, this one. Here I have, and that's somebody called Roy Farren, who was a second lieutenant, who also became a major World War II hero. And he emigrated to Calgary in the 1950s and became even a member of the provincial government. His extremely valuable testimony was published after the war in a book called The Winged Dagger. It's a full 2 chapters are devoted to the imprisonment at Kokkinia and the escape from there. It's a very valuable sanity check on the comparable, if you like, accounts by Greek sources. Which have almost no connection. A lot of them are imagined, and they were obviously trying to hide also some skullduggery on a big time, which was almost ended up with tragedy, because to put it mildly, whereas they were contracted to transport 5 British escapees to the Middle East, they also sold passages to about 10 Greeks also. So the boat was supposed to go from Piraeus to Egypt, carrying 5 people, ended up carrying 15 or 16 passengers, and predictably they ran out of everything. fuel, water, food. They barely were saved at the last minute. Okay, so it was dishonesty mixed with stupidity. We don't know, and greed. Okay, so that's the kind of thing that Lela had to face. Okay? These are the kind, because she had to interact with people with their own agendas, and the question is how to, if you like, to balance the situation. So that's Roy Farren. So that was the first phase, and I would like, and then we'll do the second phase. I won't have time to cover the third phase. The last time I'll speak to her assistance with the Jewish fleet in the Holocaust. So as a spy master, what was her role as a spy master? First of all, some background. In the fall of 1941, before she went to prison, before she was in prisons, but maybe a little around the same time, they established a large secret military base at the Chesme Peninsula of Turkey. Let's show it. And communication with the Greek resistance took place by small boat, mostly from the northern coast of area. Let's see the map. This is the Eastern Aegean. So this is Smyrna, Izmir here. And this Chesme Peninsula is here. That's where there was a secret military base, in which apparently they negotiate. We don't know how, and we don't know what the agreement was, because apparently the Turks did not have, the Turkish government did not have a right of access to that place. Okay? So it was extraterritoriality, which was very convenient, of course. Now, how far up it went? Was it an arrangement with local officials and bribes, or was it an official treaty with the secret treaty with the Turkish government? We don't know, because the file has not been released. We know that there is a file in it, but it has not been released. And the other side was here in the northern coast of Evia, the village of Chakane, which is a village in the northern coast of Evia, from which the boat traffic, small boats called kaikia in Greek, fishing boats and that kind of thing, which they were paid, they were hired by the British Secret Services. They did this highly dangerous carrying back and forth of agents and escapees from Evia and from other parts in Greece, in the western coast of Attica also, and also the further south in Evia to Chesme. So this was the if you like, main way that the Secret Service operated. And Lela Karayanni became a key node of this communication. What does it mean, a key node? She received and distributed wireless and sabotage equipment, obviously following instructions from unidentified channels, probably through wireless. I'm going to talk about it. Well, one of these identified channels was, if you like, one of those instructions. I'll tell you how this was set up. She acquired, if you like, a collaborator. That's when she started collaborating with this officer, this first lieutenant of this, the first lieutenant of the Greek army. I'll read you for, if you like, for entertainment's purpose, the description that he gave of their encounter. So when he says he's supposed to have met Lela, as he says, in a coffee shop at Veranzerev Street, near Omonia Square, the National Polytechnic Institute, where he used to meet with two British men that he was assisting in their Secret Service activity. The two men wanted to introduce him to a very special Greek woman who was helping them, even though they didn't know her very well. As the officer says, I told them to be careful because she's a woman and I don't have much confidence in women's discretion. They assured me that meeting her would not be dangerous for me, and then told me that at exactly that moment she was entering the coffee shop. And I say the only thing that rings truthfully in this account is Mr. Koutoubellis' sexist comment about women in general, which, to be fair, reflected the prevailing Greek social values at the time. Would have been an inexcusable violation of security rules to meet and presumably speak with British men in an Athenian coffee shop, which was full of traitors, if you like, and could have ended up with the arrest of everybody. Further, Greek coffee shops were generally male bastions in those days, and Lela would have been noticed immediately. Obviously, he didn't want to leave it in his testimony how he met Lela, and he didn't want to say that he was already recruited by the British Secret Service. He never admitted to be a member of the British Secret Service, and that's why he put this cock and bull story about meeting in a coffee shop by accident. And he claims it was Lela who persuaded him to join, to stay in Greece because he wanted to go to the Middle East. He was already in the Secret Service, but from that point on, he started working with Lela. And I'll say again, remember that Lela was in prison until March 26, 1942. So this episode, this encounter with this officer, must have taken place between March 1926 and April 14, 1942. Why? Because, as it turned out, she sent him, this officer, to Evia, which the other end, remember, of the communication node from the British base at Chesme, and she brought to her 2 wireless sets, which were hidden in a bag with onions. She claimed, she pretended to be a smuggler, doing this. And she kept it. So Lela took these 2 wireless sets and gave one to him. From that point on, she was acting as his her channel of communication. And the other one, she says, she sent it to a British major acting in the Carleton area. That's a lie. There was no British officer, major active in the Carleton area. Carleton is, for those of you who don't know Greece, it is in northwest of Athens, way in the very mountainous Apythania region. So there was no British officer there at that time. And so, on the other hand, we know that in sometime, this was on April 14, 1942, we know that sometime Lela provided a wireless set to a famous Greek Polish saboteur named Ivanos, who had landed in Greece in October, but he didn't have wireless communication until then. So we know he got his wireless, very reliable testimony. It was Lela who gave him his wireless set, and she knew how to operate it. And so she, obviously, this happened in April 14, 1942. She could have delivered 2 at the same time, but he got them from her. We know that she may also have given him limpet mines. So let's look at Ivanov. There she is. She was a very attractive, not only physically attractive, she was strong. We know that. I mean, I've seen in the family correspondence several, long after he was dead, they were talking about him, glowing terms. But he was Greece's champion in swimming, and he also was a member of the Polish Olympic polo team. So he's known as the hero with the 2 countries. His Polish name was Jerzy Saznovich Ivanov, and the Greek is Yorgos Ivanov. So he's in the Aklis Thessaloniki has named it's one of his playing field as Ivanov field. At any rate, So but she was very brave, very effective as a saboteur, but she lasted very, very little. Within 10.5 months. She was betrayed from day one because she apparently the British poached him from the Polish secret services, and the Polish secret services must have been penetrated because from the time he left for Greece, they knew that he was coming. So, and here it is a poster offering 500,000 drachmas for anyone who provide information to be arrested. And indeed, I was arrested in September 42 and executed a month later with several of his collaborators. They did not betray them. They did not betray them. Even though she had frequent contact with him, she gave him the wireless and possibly, as I said, sabotage equipment because he used very, very sophisticated sabotage equipment, limpet mines, and incendiary dust, which he couldn't get in Greece. There was also arrests in that time. They eliminated a large part of the SOE organized and sabotage group called Prometheus, but it was a good thing. But good thing, no, because they were executed, several of them were executed, but the one, it wasn't a very well run, that Prometheus group, and it was replaced by the Apollo group, directed by somebody called S Perrakis, also a refugee from Asia Minor, a fairly sophisticated man. I don't know his profession, probably a lawyer, but he ended up in the board of the insurance company. And he formed the Apollo group, which was one of the most effective sabotage and espionage groups in occupied Europe by the SOE's own admissions. They praised the sky in a study that was written post-war. Okay. And one of the first things he did, Perrakis, he formed a sabotage group, again, one very effective group, but somebody who didn't have even a fraction of the glamour of Ivanov. We don't have a picture, but we have the statue of him. He was a Nikos Adam, he was a barely literate fisherman. He couldn't read much. He knew how to sail, and yet he turned out to be one of the most heroic and selfless heroes, the most heroic, selfless personalities of the resistance. He lasted very little. He lasted 6 months. It was very effective, and the reason he was caught, well, saboteurs ran this ritual. They caught somebody, they tortured him, he led to somebody else. They tortured him, they couldn't break him, but then they brought his children, tortured his children, and then he broke out and betrayed Adam. And then he was executed. So Adam was executed in November 1943, but Perrakis credit, the Apollo sabotage team was reconstituted, will continue operations, team liberation, a very valuable, and again, with assistance from Lela, now this time mostly for espionage, because they didn't need sabotage, but they had that time the supply of the Chesmer, Chakei, the network worked very well. So that's now again between October 1943 and May 1944, another one very valuable agent was infiltrated in the German Admiralty, a German a woman from a Greek father and a French and a Greek, sorry, a German father and a Greek mother, who spied for her and got very valuable information, especially for the ship traffic, airport installations, and military maps, and also, most importantly, about plans, German plans for the evacuation for the Soviets. By the October 1943, the German conclusion. It was 6 months, 8 months after Stalingrad. There was at the end. So the last time she continued to run her organization, she was hospitalized at the Red Cross Hospital between April and 1944 and July 10 when she was arrested. She was arrested there from emotional breakdown. But in spite of the emotional breakdown, she continued to run her organization through an agent, but also by individual forays. She would get up and go and warn people. You know, they were in danger of arrests. And so one of the reasons also added to the tensions of all her work was, of course, her husband was literally living with paramour, classic blonde divorcee, him. And well, but that it would be added, if you like, to the. Well, on the other hand, you can't blame him very much. There wasn't very much of a marriage. I mean, 3 years, how much time to play the wife? But at any rate, we are not talking about this is gossip, but it did have, it did add, if you like, to the pressure. That's probably what brought about. So I'll stop here and we'll, I think, Brazil.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. And it's a great. I can't hear me. I very much appreciate the opportunity to talk to you about this book on Lela Karayanni. But before I do so, I wanted to say a few words on a personal note about Professor Perrάκis. I have known Stelis for half a century, since the early years of Renaissance in the mid-70s. An accomplished economist with a swath of academic publications to his name. Publications in economics, of course.
Louder.
Sorry. As I said, he's an accomplished economist with a swath of publications to his name. Publications, obviously, in economics. But he surprised in 2006 with the publication of a history book, the Ghost of Plaka Beach that Efforts mentioned in the introduction. That book is about the murder of his uncle from communist partisans during wartime Greece. It's a true story that reads like a whodunit thriller, as Stelis methodically walks the readers through the events and the path leading to the murder. So along the way, he's telling us a great deal about the social conditions, the political feuds, and the ugly fratricidal bloodletting that marked Greece at the time. So more than a story about a single murder, Stelis produced one of the most insightful books about the Greek Civil War. That is how one knowledgeable reviewer put it. Much the same can be said about the Lela Karayanni. In telling the story of the story of an unlikely resistance hero during World War II, Stelis has produced a solid and clear and I got take my glasses so I can read. Yes, Stelis has produced a solid, clear, and compelling history of that resistance. Now, lots has been written about the resistance over time, but as Stelis said, most of this work is confined to the armed resistance, the guerrilla warfare in the countryside. this resistance, as we know, had a tragic ending. The book tells us in vivid language how the this resistance, as we know, had a tragic ending. The book discusses in vivid detail the machinations, ideological conflicts, and intelligence failures that caused the armed resistance to careen into civil war. Now, all this, however, is mostly a sideshow. Obviously, the main focus of the book is the story of Lela Karayanni. Stelios has already taken us through much of this remarkable story. I just want you to note how closely Lela Karayanni collaborated with other resistance groups and with the British Secret Service. In stark contrast to the guerrilla bands in the mountains, which sadly often fought each other more than the common enemy, the clandestine urban resistance movement had men and women from all strata of society united in the fight to defeat the Axis. From Stelios' presentation, we've seen already how extensive and effective this movement was. It inflicted greater damage to the enemy and contributed more to the Allied cause than the armed resistance did. Yet this magnificent chapter in modern Greek history is largely unknown or ignored until now. With the publication of this book on Lela Karayanni, I believe Stelios succeeded in his stated aim to reclaim for Greece some of the moral capital she is owed for her contribution to the Allied victory in World War II. The book also succeeds in conferring long overdue recognition of the role of women in the resistance. In most narratives of the resistance, the role of women is conspicuous by its absence. Lela Karayanni is a case in point. Here is a woman who sacrificed herself in the cause of freedom and accomplished so much, as Stelios has meticulously documented, and yet she's hardly known even in her own country. Or to be more precise, hardly anything is known about her. And Lela Karayanni is not alone. She had numerous female collaborators, many who are identified as male, women who actively participated across the full gamut of clandestine resistance activities, sheltering stranded soldiers, shielding Jewish refugees, gathering intelligence, assisting in subversion and sabotage. They took huge risks and suffered hugely for it, often paying the ultimate price. The day Lela Karayanni was executed in a ravine in Hydari near Athens, 6 other women were executed along with her. So the virtual absence of women from the historiography of the Greek resistance during the Second World War is an egregious gap. And it took an economist to fill it. As an economist, I find that especially interesting. It is further proof of the thesis that, not proof rather, but confirmation of the thesis that economics is the queen of the social science.
I'm just going to say I'm a lawyer and I'm subject to lawyer jokes all the time. So I don't want to say we got a lawyer here today to stand up for my profession. But I will say to Basil's point, Chris Jenkins was also an economist. And I know we have online several other economists. So I think actually Basil's right.
By the way, Christos Jenkins ended his career as a professor of economics at Lakehead University in Thunder Bay, Ontario. And he, I had a chance to interview him, and he passed away about 10 years ago. So that's now coming towards the end, I'm not going to talk very much about armed resistance and collaboration. This topic has been discussed ad nauseam by Greek historians, and what they've written was not very good. I mean, in the sense it was partisan history, which basically there was one group, the Communist Hellas Partisan Army, who was right from the beginning, we know it now because the British were secretly following the internal communication. We know from day one that their goal was to take over Greece after independence. There is, Woodhouse by mistake put it in his 1971 book before the evidence was released. And he said, in December 1942, they decided blah, blah, blah. I noted it very carefully. It doesn't give you any reference, but since the Enigma correspondence, which follows the internal communication, tapped internal communications of the communist bands, that we know that the plan is actually. Anyhow, I don't want to go over it. As I said, it's depressing, more depressing than the other topic that I want to talk about, which is the Jewish Holocaust, which is also thoroughly depressing. Okay, but at least there is something. There is, well-defined villains. There are people who, there are a lot, big mass, unfortunately, of indifferent people, but there are also a small minority of people that I genuinely admire, those who were writers among nations. Lela Karayanni was among them. Okay? So I would like to talk a little bit about this because I was instrumental. I collected the evidence that correspondence with Yad Vashem, the Israeli agents. So I won't, as I said, I won't say anything about the armed resistance because Lela lost her life because she was involved in negotiations with a collaboration in security battalions and to persuade them to switch sides, the British sides, when the time would come for the British to enter Greece, obviously to avoid a communist takeover. The instructions that she received have never been made public, but we know that she was not the only agent. There was another British agent also participating in this negotiation. So it came from up, from higher up, obviously. Okay, and so the middleman, who was a horrible character, an out and out Nazi, who now saw the tide turning and wanted to redeem himself, and also General Vertlis, the leader of security battalions, was not a pro-Nazi. He was a pro-British, but he was also an anti-communist. And so they received the British written directives and possibly also exculpatory, papers that they could use after liberation and not be prosecuted for treason, but they have never been located. We know all this. There is a reliable testimony. So I don't want to go over that. And I don't, as I said, in the end, she was at one of the documents of this negotiation was found by the Germans, and then they arrested the middleman. The middleman broke, gave Lela's name, and so she was arrested at the hospital with 5 of her 7 children, all of them imprisoned at the Haidari prison camp. And Lela was executed, as I said, September 8th. The children were freed thanks to generous bribes paid by Lela's husband, because the two younger boys, the older boy was not caught, literally at the last minute. They were condemned to death. They were about to be executed next morning, but he bribed somebody, the father, and they managed to let them go the night before, secretly. They came to the cell and they're gone. At that time, the German services, they were ready to leave to leave Greece, and obviously they were in turmoil, very amenable to bribery. But no one bothered to bribe it was very difficult to write and let Lela go because she was too important, and also she had been defiant in the days, really defiant. So I don't want to describe. So let's what an epilogue. In the end, what is it that stands out about Lela Karayanni? She was a woman in a man's position and a man's world. She was a civilian in a profession dominated by military men. She learned everything on the job without any training or assistance. She was cautious and protective of her agencies, etc. She had a varied, complex, and successful, which we saw in data, only to repeat, hosting of escapism and industrial scale in the middle of a famine. I forgot to mention, while she was hosting the escapism, Greece was gripped by a famine that killed 50,000 people within 6 months or so in the Athens area only. Horrible. That was the biggest source of victims, if you like, Greece during the occupation, because for a very simple reason, there were three occupation armies, the German, the Italian, and the Bulgarian, and the acquisition of all the food. There was no food for the population, except whatever you could scrape here and there from the rural areas. So people died of hunger. And so in spite of this, she managed, as I said, by finding people who were not very honest, were pilfering stores for soup kitchens and all this, and selling them to her. Never chose, she bought them and feeding the British, the British that she hosted. So she was also a strange mixture of compassion and toughness. She treated the hospitalized soldiers like her children. I enjoyed writing the chapter when she was hosting when the chapter when Lela Karayanni, because it gives you a picture. These were young men, like in their early 20s, young men who were, a lot of them losing their life. They were in danger, if you like, and several, and they were suffering also. And of course, they were amenable to emotional, if you like, emotionally vulnerable. So a lot of them several of them had affairs with Greek women. It was very sweet to see, young Greek women, of course, they saw these very handsome young men there. And so you see, all of a sudden, they are hiding, and there are spontaneous parties, playing a game that I remember from my teenage years, spin the bottle and all this. In the middle, you see, of a history about murders and killings and all this, the game of spin the bottle, which gives a sort of freshness. There were young people, like my sons, and now my grandkids. Now, she offered also emotional. She had young men and women as agents who were devoted to her, literally. One of her agents, he lost his mind when she was executed. And he attacked in a suicide attack a group of German officers. And of course, he was shot and killed them. She sacrificed his life to avenge her. To that point, she inspired, if you like, worship and affection. She offered emotional support to women in prison with her. So there's there's picture of a young woman. She was only 17, and she was in a communist group. The spy was arrested and was shot. And so poor woman, 17, and she treated her like her daughter. She was shot 3 days before Lela, but the 2 weeks they were together, and she spent them in her arms, babying her. She was a young woman of 17 who was going to lose her life, so she offered emotional support. On the other hand, she despised collaborators, blackmailers, cowards, or enemy agents. She used physical violence against some German interpreters when she was arrested. And she did the same thing with extortionists blackmailing Jews. There's a description, she caught some extortionists, and she went with a companion who was obviously must have been hefty, and she herself was not exactly weak. And they threw them down the stairs. They picked the shit out of them and threw down the stairs. And the middleman who betrayed her there was, well, she happened to be a homosexual, so she called him a sissy. That's just a polite way of saying she didn't use the term sissy, used something much harsher at any rate, and she hit him, also threw him down, sitting on his head. Of course, the Germans were around in the end, he paid for it. They brutalized. But that was the kind of person she was. She was, as I say, wasn't a smart thing. And on the other hand, it was, in line with an indomitable spirit, and without the spirit, she would have been Lela Karayanni. And as I said, she died heroically, singing the Greek national anthem and urging her fellow execution victims not to show any fear. So I would like to now, for the Holocaust in Greece, let's see. The Holocaust in Greece, I would like to say what she did. The Yad Vashem recognition was, when I started in 2006, 2007, was based on two cases. A married couple in Thessaloniki with their little daughter, and two young men of 18, classmates of Lela's son, Nelson in Athens. I would like to say that she did much more than this, a lot. But again, there was misinformation. And again, another thing, that Greece is moral capital. I became aware of the Jewish Holocaust when I was in Berkeley as a student there. I was in a very Jewish environment, married woman from that environment, but I didn't know very much about it. So my first exposure was Hannah Arendt's famous writing Eichmann in Jerusalem, which had been Eichmann trial had been only 5 or 6 years earlier, and there the comments about Greece, they were not flattering. They talked about the Greece difference, and they didn't do anything, etc., etc. And on the other hand, they praised Bulgaria to the sky because their own Jews were not deported. Well, now things have changed because Bulgaria did not deport its own Jews, but they deported all the Jews in the occupied Greek territory in Eastern Macedonia. They sent them to Auschwitz and Treblinka without anyone raising any problem. By contrast, in Greece, when I was studying this, the first place when I went to the Jewish community, I asked the person, so what do you know about Lela Karayanni, about her involvement? The Jews are exploring this. And you know what I got the answer? I'm not saying from whom. It was, no, we don't know. The only ones who helped the Jews were the Communist National Liberation Front, the army. I was stunned because it was false. Actually, the two personalities that do the most in the Athens area for this were, first of all, the tower figure, the Archbishop of Athens, who, from day one, he shouted, the famous St. Paul, there's no Jew and no Greek, no slave and no free man, no man or woman, all of you are one in Christ Jesus. She put it. She shouted from every church, and from that, and also she did something else, which is much more interesting. And she was the one who helped the chief rabbi of Athens to escape to the liberated territory. Otherwise, Athens would have been destroyed. The Athens Jews would have been destroyed the same way the Thessaloniki Jews were destroyed. The rabbi was, they ordered, the Holocaust in Greece was a bilateral function. The Greek state did not enter it precisely because, in addition to Damaskinos pressured also the political, there was no Greek police that was involved in the arrests of Jews, the way they were in France. The Grand Raffle Vivaldi took place and with French gendarmes, French policemen were arrested the Jews who were deported and murdered, not in Greece. It was always a bilateral in Thessaloniki with the Greek, the Jewish community and the German forces. I'm not saying that there were not people who were submitting in Thessaloniki, especially. There were the Greeks, but they didn't play any role in the deportation because, unfortunately, the community, there's a lot of complaints there. Anyhow, I don't want to talk about Thessaloniki. I haven't done very much archival material. But what I want to say for the two people that I saw, I'll tell you what she did. Okay, I'll read to you what these two people she say in the end. Okay, and then I'm saying the first one is from the family in Thessaloniki, and the father was a very prosperous family. Paper products manufacturer called Solomon Cohen, and he wrote to Nikos Karayannis in November 1947, quote, "In especially difficult moments when we thought that all is lost and there is no hope of avoiding arrest, we sought help from Mrs. Karayanni. And our hopes came true. From that point on, we always find Mrs. Karayanni ready to protect and help us effectively, even when her own life was in danger and without giving any thought to effort or expenses." End quote. And here's what the signing testimony of one of the two young men, Leon Gavrilidis or Idas, states unequivocally. Him, I interviewed a person, the father, of course, was dead by the time. The daughter was a little girl, so she wasn't very clear with the dates, but in the family of three. But Leon Gavrilidis was 18 when she was in Lela, I approached Lela, and so she was alive, and I have his testimony. I quote, "I feel that I owe my life to Lela Karayanni and her Pupulina organization. Without her, I would never have managed to escape from Athens to the liberated Greek areas under resistance control. Lela Karayanni helped me for her own patriotic reasons, completely devoid of self-interest, as she had helped countless other victims of the German occupation, both Jews and non-Jews." These statements about events that took place more than 80 years ago resonate with the spirit of humanism and compassion for the underdog that, as we saw, coexisted with toughness when it came to fight for a worthy cause. They are also the best justification for the biography of the person to whom they are referred to, as well as the fitting words for closing this presentation.
We'll take questions. I know I have a question about spin the bottle, but I'll ask that later. If there are questions on the topic in the room, just raise your hand and yes, go ahead.
I have two questions for you. The next one is going to be work for you. As you remember, in the library, when Schultz made the first presentation, he made it. I was in charge at that time. That time you didn't have enough material. Between that time you made a presentation about Lela, and today, how much work have you done and what difficulties you had to get this information?
Well, just a second. Just 1 second. Did that record for the purposes of? Do you want me to repeat the question or no?
I know the question.
Okay, go ahead.
Well, let me put it this way. In the preface to the book, I point out, first of all, I started in 2007 after working on this. And that's when I had the first impression. And I collected also the material, the raw material, which was in mostly from an archive, Greek archives photographed it. I went also to the Kew Gardens to the British Archives and copied. So did quite a bit. But then, you know, and also Lela became a Writers Among Nations in 2011, thanks to the research. That's when I did that research with her collecting. But in 2011, you know, I had, you know, I was with my wife helping and all this, and she was interested. But in 2011, she had the first bout of cancer. Okay? And then I stopped her. There was neither, if you like, the time, because she was frail and I was taking, also helping her, but and also, you know, emotionally, I was geared more towards her. Fortunately, she survived. But when she passed away in 2018, exactly 5 years ago, that's when I started working 10 times harder than I worked before. I had nothing to do with my life except do research in economics. This is the second book I wrote. I strongly discourage you from even opening the first one, which is unreadable. Basically, half of it is equations and the rest is text. And so this was a way of dealing with my son. I must do work in a channel. So this was, I enjoyed it. I didn't know that you see, when I started working, I told people that this biography needs to be written. I said, you know what the answer? Most of them answered, well, first of all, she didn't do very much. You know, they only knew about her, Lela Karayanni. No one had a clue. I wasn't sure about it. You know, you have to go to reconstruct, if you like, this thing. It took a lot of, took some reading and thinking. And second, other people they told me, oh, you know, you in 10 pages you will have said what needs to be said. That's ridiculous. You know, even the Lela Karayanni took about 70 pages to describe the spin the bottles and all this. This is part of the Lela. There were children, literally, you know, young people. So that's what it took. As that it took me. It was in 2 phases. The second phase was very fast. Very fast. I was surprised. I started. It took me a year to pull it out from the raw material.
Anyway, you brought a gold mine here. If I compare the two presentations when we started at the library, today you have brought a gold mine.
Sure.
So thank you for that. Now, the second question is this presentation available in Greek?
Yes, the book circulates in Greek by Epikendo. Go to Epikendo and they'll say,
The book, I know. The presentation is available. Your presentation in Greek?
No, I don't have any presentation in Greek.
Because as an audience, and they're affected for that period.
I have asked I've asked my publisher there to organize something for me online, of course, because he's here, but he hasn't done it yet. I pressed him again. I can't do it. I cannot push other people, you know, very much. I have to report him.
I have a suggestion I gave to the president, and you are there. We are going to work. Thank you, Mr. Critique. Thank you.
Did you have contact with Lela's family or descendants?
Yes, I did. I did. I have, you know, I think there are several interviews with whatever remain. But to be honest with you, first of all, the family dynamics among the descendants were dysfunctional. Because there were the 2 members, her son and a granddaughter from another brother, were fighting in the court on the language. So I didn't want to get mixed up with it. I just got their testimony, and in terms, well, I can say a few things. Her son, Yoros, was a very charming man and all this, and nice and all this, but she didn't want to. He didn't want me to mention that she was working for the British Secret Services. That's ridiculous. Where was she getting all this equipment? She couldn't put it out of thin air. And no, you know, all right, yeah, but she did it on her own. She didn't do it on her own. She did it a group. So she was insisting that I should minimize the role of the British Secret Service. It would have killed it. Okay. They killed it. Her granddaughter also wasn't very happy because she thought that I shouldn't mention the fact that her grandfather was cheating on her grandma, but she had told me. She gave me the name of the person with whom I know. She gave me the name, and I thought I'd put it in for very simple reason. It's relevant. It's relevant to her nervous breakdown. Why? I'm not interested in gossip. And I said I could understand the man. I'm a husband. Also, I've been a husband. So if you have a wife that you don't see her at all for 3 years, I mean, the temptation is there. There's no question.
Shane, do you have any questions?
I just have some congratulations from Eftichios. I'm afraid I can't read all of his last name. Yeah, the machine cuts off his last name, but he just says congratulations to Professor Perrakis and the organizers. Thank you for the excellent event.
Another economist.
Perhaps.
It's also from Crete, huh?
Yeah.
What else?
Yeah, no, that's it. There's no questions.
Any other questions in the room?
Maybe I'll ask one. Can you speak to the Jewish community's reaction when you came forward and brought some of this information forward on Lela's?
They were very supportive. I published an article in December 2012 of the Chronica, the Jewish community. They were supportive. No, there was no question. And when they found out, obviously it changed the perspective. The Greek Jewish community had a certain affinity, affection for, first of all, there's no question. It was not the only one, but it was the best organized and the most numerous, and especially in Thessaloniki, there was importance because Thessaloniki was a rat trap. You couldn't get out of it. And I feel also, admiration and affection because the people that Lela helped and other people that survived in Athens, hiding by Christian friends, they were all middle class, prosperous, well integrated, spoke perfect Greek, etc. Thessaloniki had a lot of proletariat, poor people, steel doors, dock workers, or blue collar work, etc. And these people, they didn't speak Greek, and of course they had no way of moving, bribing, getting out. So a communist connection like this was literally a life-saving line. Okay? So I appreciate it. Last but not least, the Jewish community of Thessaloniki was a communist party stronghold during the 1930s. 2 of the 15 members that the Communist Party had elected in the 1930s in the Greek parliament were Thessaloniki Jews. I mean, which means that they had local strength, as it was true also in Eastern Europe. There was the tradition, if you like, they were attractive. But of course, it doesn't mean that they were involved in the horrors after that. They were not. Some of them, actually, they were treated leniently. During the Civil War, some of them fought with the guerrillas, but they were, when they were arrested, they weren't executed, unlike the Greeks. They let them go to. Generally there was an accommodation. I think they understood. Well, there's a tragedy. In Thessaloniki, it was, as I said, awful because the percentage of those who saved were very small. And frankly, it's very difficult to see what could have been done. What could have been done? Those who were saved escaped to Athens. That's the only way to go to Athens, or went to the mountains. They came, you see, I described in chapter 14 how the Communist Party went to the Jewish community, asked them, send them, ask your young men and women to join our guerrilla bands. And they told him no. I don't know if they've said yes, if many would have gone. There's some tragic thing. People who had gone to join the resistance, and then when their family was deported, they came back. Of course, they were murdered with this kind. This hindsight is 20/20 vision. You see. Anything else? As I said, it's not a cheerful thing.
The question back.
Yeah.
I'm just wondering, Karayanni's reputation kind of transcends the political cleavages of Greece now.
Yeah.
But given your expertise, I know, on civil war dynamics and already your references now, I wonder if you could say anything about how her image maybe rehabilitated in some quarters, depending on political affiliation.
Well, to begin with, as I said, she for a long time, because she was let's put it, she was of the non-communist resistance. She had been targeted. There was, and they were saying, well, the communists were saying the other side. Then that's why her son didn't want me to mention. So if you want to pretend that she was neutral, maybe she was personally neutral, but it's certainly what she did was not neutral because she was following orders. Following orders very, very clearly aimed at preventing one. For instance, she sent one of her agents to Evia to raise. She had an officer, a colonel there, and asked him, to help the band of Dimitris Psaros, who was in the Parnassos, surrounded by Velochotis and the Hellas guerrillas. And she refused. But he said, I am a monarchist and he was a republican. When you see these things, what do you say? We say Orse from the distance. That's the kind of character that you are. I'm sorry, that you had the rank that you had. But again, you don't know. Maybe there's lack of information. There are many things. I don't want to judge people. You cannot judge these people. Same thing way. I don't take. There's a very strong debate in the Jewish community now about the chief rabbi of Thessaloniki, who is denounced as a traitor by some, because she certainly didn't advise. She advised them to follow the German instructions, which of course led to actions. So, but again, she knew that he was. She saved his life. His family at least. He was deported to Bergen-Belsen, and his family was saying I think he got typhus and died. So, but at any rate, so he's accused of choosing his family's welfare over his community. But on the other hand, do you know many people who wouldn't do it? You have to have a very strong moral, if you like, personality in order to sacrifice your family, in order to save your community. She didn't. So you don't judge it. You don't know how you investigate.
All right, we have a reception outside, and so in the absence of any other questions, I thank you very, very much, Professor Perracki. That was wonderful.
Thank you.